boys and girls. Well, today's story is What's Sprouting in My Trash? And I can tell that this is an asking sentence because of two clues. Has a question mark, that's the biggest clue. And then there's an asking word, what's, which is actually what is. So, what's sprouting in my trash? A book about composting. Do you know what composting is? Well, we're going to find out. And it is illustrated by Esther Porter and written by Esther Porter. Let's find out. What's sprouting in my trash? Do you like to recycle? Earth does. In fact, nature has taught us a great deal about recycling. Earth knows how to renew itself naturally. If we watch closely, we can learn too. So we've got some kids who are recycling, and the earth already knows how to recycle. Let's find out how it knows. Compost is nature's way of recycling. In autumn, hey, that's the season that it is now. A tree's leaves fall to the ground. The leaves' energy goes back into the dirt. Now Earth can use the energy again. It might even go back into the tree that it came from. So the leaves fall off the tree, they decompose down into the soil, and then the soil gains nutrients to give back to the tree. So, pretty good recycling. Nature never loses energy, thanks to a few little helpers in the ground called microorganisms. Micro what? Microorganisms. Micro means small, really, really small. And organism means living. Get it? Microorganisms are creatures so small that we can only see them through a microscope. Wow, it almost looks like spaghetti. With the help of larger critters like worms and bugs, microorganisms eat almost everything that falls to the ground. In fact, when plants and animals die, microorganisms have a feeding frenzy. That means they eat a lot really fast. It's almost like a buffet. As they eat, microorganisms take in energy. They keep a little bit for themselves, and the rest of the energy goes back into the ground. The microorganisms' work turns trash into a super rich mix called hummus. And that's not the kind of hummus that we eat. Different. The breakdown of energy happens slowly in nature, but it happens quickly on compost. Compost can be kept in a bin or in a pile on the ground. It can be small or it can be really big. There are many ways to make compost, but a few things are needed for it to work really well. So we're going to make some compost to get some nutrients with the help of those microorganisms. Wait a minute, I recognize some of this stuff. It's like fresh food left over from what I eat and clippings from the lawn and gardening. Compost needs the right ingredients. Grass clippings, leaves, and shredded newspaper are good. Newspaper? Kitchen scraps like banana peels and eggshells are perfect for compost. So anything that is fresh and leafy is good for compost. Any of our fresh fruits and vegetables that we don't eat and have gone yucky, they can go in compost. And even newspaper. Cool. Don't. Do not add meat to the compost. Meat attracts dogs, cats, raccoons, and other animals that would dig through it. We don't want those critters hurting themselves or the compost pile. So, no proteins. Just like people, compost needs air. Oxygen keeps away the stinky bacteria, and it feeds the good bacteria. Keep compost nice and fluffy and full of air. How? Well, you just mix it. Look, they're using their big pitchfork to mix the compost to keep it full of nice, fresh oxygen. Needs that air, just like we do. Compost also needs the right amount of water. Hey, so do we. If there's too much water, the air can't reach the little helpers in the pile. If there's not enough water, the microorganisms can dry out and die. The best compost has the perfect mix of water and air. So we've got to get it just right, kind of like a recipe. Compost stays healthy when it's kept warm. As good bacteria zip around feasting on trash, they create their own heat. When it is warm, the ingredients quickly break apart. This speeds up the compost process. So here we've got a temperature gauge, which tells us this temperature is between 80 and 120. So that's the perfect temperature for compost to work well. Gotta have just the right. Aren't worms amazing? They carry water, air, and nutrients throughout the compost pile, taking these important things to the microorganisms. Worms don't have eyes, but they can sense light to get around. And they eat their weight in food every day. So worms are really good for compost, breaking down old dead material and turning it into nutrients and soil that's good for the garden. When we compost, we have less trash to dump in our landfills. Compost also acts as a filter for earth and prevents pollution from spreading. When we allow nature to teach us, our planet is a happier and more beautiful place to live. Aw, I like how these plants are growing in the shape of a heart to show that we love our earth, because it's the only habitat we've got. We need it, so we got to take care of it. And then here's a recipe for composting in a jar. It has directions, and it has materials and instructions on what to do. So, you want to see how compost works? Make compost in a jar. Like a compost pile or bin, compost in a jar turns scraps and clippings into the perfect compost. Here's how you make it. You need a large clear plastic or glass jar, food scraps, fruit peels, and bread. You need some leaves, you need some glass clippings, and you need a little bit of garden soil, but not potting soil. Place 2 inches of soil in the bottom of the plastic or glass jar. Moisten, that means add a little bit of water, not too much. For best results, place food scraps, leaves, and grass clippings on top of the soil in several repeating layers. Kind of like you're making lasagna. You got to put it in layers. Leave the jar open and place on a windowsill or other location where it won't be disturbed. Check the jar daily. What changes do you see? Add a little bit of water each week. Mix it by stirring. When your compost is broken down into dark, rich soil, add it to the garden. So see if you can give that a try, making compost in a jar. Well, I'm glad we can compost with our old fruit, but sometimes, like now in the fall, I like to eat my fruit, and I like it to be fresh. Hands up if you've ever eaten an apple and you left it out and it got brown. It got so brown and yucky that you didn't want to eat it. Well, we need to figure out how can we stop our apple from turning brown. So that's going to be our question for our experiment. How can we stop our apple going brown? That's our essential question, scientists. We need to figure it out. How can we figure it out? I know. Let's do an experiment. I'm going to go get the things and we're going to set it up.